evening train. Sorry about that, tooting in the background, but that's sometimes what you get when you are outside late at night, reading on your front porch because it's too freaking hot to do it during the day. Hello again, everybody. Thomas here, your host as always, and welcome back to SFF180, where I wanted to do this quick commemorative video because it was exactly 20 years ago today that I launched my little book review website, originally called sfreviews.net. It's a little mind-blowing to realize that it has been that much time. And I just thought it might be fun to take a few minutes to sort of reflect on all the changes and what I have seen in all that time and how things are different now from how they were then. I started doing this. Well, first off, my inspiration to do it at all was kind of nostalgic. Because when I was a boy, a little kid, high school kid, I was in a little Houston, Texas sci-fi group, the nerdiest thing you could possibly be in, way back then. And we had a little Xeroxed fanzine, and I wrote little science fiction book reviews in that. And then, of course, that went away, and I went on to, college and other stuff and other interests. And I kind of fell out of reading SFF for quite a few years. And it wasn't until sort of the end of the 90s that I don't know, I was looking for something that would be a leisure activity to kind of take the pressure of life away a little bit, and I just remembered how much I used to love reading SFF. I mean, there was a certain phase in my young life that was very formative, and where reading SFF meant a lot to me, and not just reading it, but sharing my experience of reading SFF with people reading a fanzine, writing reviews, and things like that. And I came up with the idea of doing a website. Now, you have to realize that this is before Goodreads, before book blogs exploded in the 2000s. It was not before science fiction websites. There were quite a few very prominent science fiction websites. There was SF Site and many others that were regularly publishing reviews. But I wanted to sort of do my own thing, and so that is what I did. I think I remember getting this very basic, easy to afford, what you see is what you get web design program for my computer, and I just sort of cobbled together some pages and wrote my content, and actually spent a couple of years doing that, long before I actually launched the site, because I didn't just want to launch the site and have it just be like 5 book reviews, right? What's the point? I wanted to kind of open it up with a bang. So I spent something like 2.5 years just reading books and writing reviews and saving those as files and just getting ready for, the big day when I would plan to launch it, which was never really a big day that I had a specific target one in mind. I just sort of knew when I was ready, I was ready. I would be ready whenever I'm ready. And so that date turned out to be July 1st, 2001. And, of course, I was originally going to reserve the domain sfreviews.com, but some tit got it just before me. So I went with the .net domain, and it was that for many, many years. And, and that domain still exists, and there's a site still up on it. And as you know, if you have been watching my site, my channel here, for some time, I have been in the act of porting and bringing all the old content from the sfreviews.net website over to the new domain, which is sff180.com, and that is taking a lot of time, and I'll go into why very shortly. It was interesting in subsequent years to see how the online book community very rapidly grew and changed. But to get back to when I started, I initially just read whatever, right? I didn't have this idea that I would be timely and that I would be covering new releases on the dot, and be focusing on that sort of a thing. In fact, it wasn't for about 3 or 4 years, I think 2004, 2005, that I actually ended up getting on publishers' reviewer mailing lists. And John Scalzi was actually very helpful in getting me started there. He gave me the mailing address, the email address, that is, of his publicist at Tor. And I contacted her, and I began that relationship. And then through that relationship, I gained the confidence to approach other publicists, and eventually I was working with 5, 6, 7 different publishers. And so that was great. But that took several years to come about. Initially, I was just reading whatever I had, and I would just go to like half-price books. Any book that I didn't already have, like in a box somewhere from like my old collection when I was a kid. And I had gotten rid of a lot of those, which breaks my heart because some of those, I kept my paperbacks in very good condition. And so some of those, to have those old paperbacks in that good condition today would be nice. So yeah, I was dumb. I got rid of a lot of books and I regret doing that. But I just started going to half-price books, where you could get little paperbacks for a couple of dollars. And I just started reviewing whatever. Mostly I started with the kinds of books that I remember reading when I was younger and just getting into SFF and enjoying at that time. And so I picked up just a bunch of authors familiar to me. I remember the very first book that I read and wrote a review of for the intent of putting it on the site was a book by Gordon R. Dickson called Home from the Shore. I started with that one because it was short. I mean, it's practically a novella, really. I recall I gave it 3 stars. Thought it was pretty good. It was a hobby. It was a hobby that turned into a thing that got pretty exciting for me for quite a while. I eventually got to the point where publishers were pull quoting me on the actual books, which was like a real thrill, especially when your pull quote appeared on the front cover of a book. Then it was like, oh, whoa, did that really happen? Am I like somebody now? The imposter syndrome hits pretty quickly. As the other book bloggers just sort of, I knew a lot of them, the people who were becoming established as SFF book bloggers, many of whom had quickly gained an audience that eclipsed mine, because book blogs could form blog networks, and then they all sort of build each other up, right? And I wasn't a blog, and I didn't want to switch to becoming a blog when book blogs became popular, because I liked the way having a traditional website could archive things, and I wanted to set my website up. This was something very important in the early days of web design, was navigability. It was very important to me that no review, no matter how big the website got, if it got to 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 reviews, and it's definitely bigger than that now when I finally get everything together. But no matter how big it got, and no matter how much content was on it, I wanted no review on the entire site to be more than 2 clicks away from the home page. That was, and so it seemed to me that just the website format, as opposed to constructing it as a book blog, was more practical. Mainly, it was a thing for me. And I'll tell you, I was in a very different place in my life in the 2000s than I am right now. Right now I would describe myself perhaps as content as I've ever been. I've got my health for the most part, I think. I'm emotionally secure, financially secure. These were all things that were not true back in the 2000s. I was very much living on a razor's edge. I'm incredibly privileged now, and I acknowledge that, and I appreciate that, and I wish that for everyone. But back in the 2000s, let's just say sfreviews.net kept me together, right, during some very, very difficult, times that I had to just, endure. Like we all have to endure bad times in our lives, right? I started this channel back in October of 2013. I'd started letting the website kind of, I was letting the grass grow, okay? And I wasn't, being as regular with it anymore. But I didn't like to think that I had lost interest in it. I hadn't. So I began the channel because, I knew that I needed to freshen it up and freshen up my whole approach to doing things. My inspiration to do a booktube channel did not actually come from other booktubers. I didn't know booktube was a thing. I didn't know there were other booktubers. I didn't know anybody else was doing what I was doing on booktube. I assumed probably somebody was, but I didn't know of any of those channels. I didn't know of any of those channels until after I launched my own channel, which was originally referred to as SFF180, a production of sfreviews.net. And the channel name was sfreviews.net. After a few months, I switched that. No, my inspiration for the channel came from friends of mine who had gaming channels. It was YouTube gamers inspired me to do this. Because I could see that they were using YouTube to pursue something about which they were extremely passionate as a hobby, right? And make friends, make connections, build a community. And so that's why, for example, SFF180 probably has a look that is much different than other booktube channels, right? For instance, my thumbnails, right? My thumbnails, I got the idea to do my thumbnails the way I do them through looking at what the gamers would do with their channels. And they would have thumbnails. For example, they would play a particular game, right? Sometimes there would be like a cartoonified version of themselves that an artist friend had drawn for them. Actually in the game world. So they'd be, if they were playing Left 4 Dead, there'd be a little cartoon them, like shooting the zombies in the thumbnails. And I thought, well, that's fun. So I decided to do something like that. And I brought in my cat at the time, little Wink, whom I miss very much. But she had one eye. She was missing her left eye due to an infection when she was a very, very small kitten. And the rescue that was looking after her that I got her from, they did surgery on the eye to remove it and stitched her up in a way that was so perfect there was like no visible scar whatsoever. So it looked like she'd been born that way, with her one eye. And she was so cute and she had a good personality, but she didn't quite like being on camera very much. In the earliest videos, I have her in my lap and she's sitting there, and you can see she's kind of skittish and wants to go run and play and do stuff. I was really hoping that she would be in every video with me, but she was not always in the mood for that. But she became my channel mascot, and a Facebook friend of mine who is a brilliantly talented and gifted artist and cartoonist, Matt Olson, has done every single one of my thumbnails since that date. So I really feel like SFF180 is a two-man operation. He's the unseen guy behind the scenes who creates the art that gives the channel its personality, I think. And it makes it distinct from other booktube channels. I mean, can you imagine me just doing a typical booktube channel thumbnail where I'm just holding up a book with a dorky smile on my face, No offense, everybody else, you have lovely dorky smiles. But my dorky smile, I don't think is all that charismatic. I like having little cartoon Wink cosplaying the book. That was the idea. She would cosplay a scene from the book in the thumbnail, whatever book I was reviewing. This all ties into just how much has changed in all these years. I started from just this remote little website. I don't have any screenshots of the early site to show you, but the design was pretty hinky. I was not great with design. And I would either just be very bland and very ordinary, which people at the time actually seemed to prefer, because this was still the days when most people were still accessing the internet through dial-up. If you had a little money and your neighborhood was a bit, fashion forward, you might actually have a DSL hookup, right? Cable internet was still a few years ahead, and fiber optic might have been a William Gibson cyberpunk dream at that point. But yeah, the simpler the design, people seem to prefer, because otherwise, even like a tiny little JPEG could take, quite a while to load. It was ridiculous. I mean, it really was how early, the early internet was so primitive. And today, I would like to think of myself as being a guy who's a little bit more willing to roll with the changes. Although there are some changes that I have not yet rolled with. Believe it or not, I have actually given some thought to doing book talk as an adjunct to this channel. It certainly wouldn't be a thing that would replace this channel. But I thought, well, how hard would it be to just like do a 1-minute video in addition to, what I do here. And it would just be like the book review stuff, not any of the mailbags. But the more I think about it, I'm like, I don't know that my approach would fly on Book Talk. Maybe I'm just not right for that venue. You always have to think about where you would fit and where you would feel like what you were contributing was something that makes sense in that particular venue as opposed to another venue. I feel like what I do makes sense in BookTube. I could adapt it to Book Talk, I suppose, try to be a little more animated and do just quick 1-minute capsule reviews, but then I'm like, that's extra work. And maybe I'm getting lazy as a tired old man, but... Now, publishing, how has that changed? Quite a bit. Like I said, I have seen, when I started, I was just reviewing all the old school stuff. Again, stuff that I had grown up with as a little boy. And of course, the science fiction world of publishing was much, much different then, right? Today, much more diversity, much more inclusion. There are voices now that are huge in science fiction who would not have, even been getting publishing contracts even as recently as 10 years ago, let alone 20 or 30 or 40. The time has come for new voices. And that, to me, has been a very important thing to roll with the changes on and to welcome all of that, and not be one of these boring old farts from the old guard who's, the old man yelling at clouds, what are you doing to my genre? It's never even occurred to me to be like that. I mean, it just makes no sense to me. Where is the logic in denying that times change and we change with them or we become irrelevant? We get left behind forever. I am reminded of an interview done several years ago, not in the publishing world, in the music world, two great musicians, Pete Townshend and John Entwistle, from a band called The Who. Ask your dad if you've never heard of them. But you've probably heard them. But anyway, John Entwistle was talking about how, this was shortly before he died, but he was mentioning that, hip-hop was on the rise at this time, and it just wasn't a music that he understood. And Pete Townshend sort of broke in and said, well, yeah, but it's not our job to understand it. It's our job to get out of its way, right? There are new audiences, a new generation. I've encountered way too many, old farts who are just sort of like, no, you're wrong for liking the things you do because they're all crap, because I don't get it. I'm old. Here, you should love all the stuff I love. That's when the good stuff was. Everybody in their own generation thinks that everything that was best came out when they were growing up, right? Because that's what formed us and our personalities. So, hang on. We have this little naughty thing who is rocking my tripod right now, rubbing up against it because she wants attention. So anyway, I'm going to stop yammering and living in the past, as I just said. But I just wanted to say it has been a ride, and it has been a terrific ride. And some of you have maybe been with me for most of the whole ride, if not, just the BookTube part of it. Some of you remember the old site and were reading it back then before you started watching me here. To whatever degree you are watching me or reading my reviews or supporting me or just, enjoying the kind of persona and, the presence that I bring to the community, then I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for these 20 years. It's been a terrific 20 years. And are there going to be 20 more? Well, maybe if I keep my health, and if this one doesn't scratch and claw me to death. I can see myself just doing this until they literally wheel me out. So thank you again very much, and I think I'm going to go inside now and treat myself to something very cold and fizzy.